This is GD Reads, the podcast. I hope everybody's having a great day. I'd like everyone to put on headphones or plug into your car, sit down, relax, and enjoy. Today's story is titled Knock Knock. This happened a few years ago when I was still living in South Dakota. Just to give an example of how small this town was, after 9 p.m., the town would turn off its stoplights. Everyone knew each other. Stores and even Domino's was a 2-minute walking distance from my home. Above everything else, no one in the town bothered to lock their doors due to how safe the town was and how everyone knew each other. It was just a quiet and lovely town. I was one of the few Asian people there, except for the Chinese family that ran the only Chinese food takeout place in town. I worked in the only hospital on assignment with my travel company, and I worked the night shift. I know, it's cliche, and I can see the eye rolls happening. However, I honestly liked working the night shift. It was usually quiet, except for the days when there was a full moon. Now, I usually didn't believe in the spiel about how night shifts with a full moon always had something crazy happen. I had been working in the medical field for around 7 years, mostly working night shifts. Working these night shifts, I had never experienced anything more than someone having sundowner syndrome. But on this summer night, it was raining, and the moon was playing peekaboo through the rolling clouds. Lightning flashed, and thunder roared outside. The wind practically had nails that evening, scraping across the roof with a ghostly voice as if it were trying to wake the dead, or all of my residents. I was the only charge nurse on a unit of 80 patients. While that doesn't sound like it can be possible or legal, in certain states there are no guidelines or limitations on how many patients a nurse or even a certified nursing staff can handle. I was grumbling at my station desk in Unit A. I had tons of paperwork to complete, including an admission paper that needed to be inputted into the EMAR, medications to check in, and the prep paperwork and vials for the blood draws for the 5 a.m. labs. I just remember being so exhausted because the night prior, we had someone hysterically scream bloody murder in Unit B and terrify the living daylight out of the second charge nurse. We call her Sandy, who was supposed to be on the shift with me tonight. So, Sandy had been so shaken up by the event because when she had gone to check the patient, he had kept insisting the death was in the room. His scythe was by her throat, and he was stating that the land the hospital was built on is cursed. It was completely understandable why she had called in sick, stating she was feeling unwell, but damn it all, I was tired myself and I hadn't gotten much sleep either. I remember closing my eyes and then hearing someone approach the nurse's station. I had thought it was one of my CNAs doing her rounds and didn't think much of it, until the footsteps stopped at my desk. Opening my eyes, I looked to see one of my regular sundowner patients. However, she was staring right beside me, rather than looking at me. "Hello, Mary. Is it breakfast yet?" she said in a chipper tone as I frowned and got up from my seat. "Mrs. H, there is no one named Mary here. Are you all right?" I asked, my eyes casting to the spot where she was looking so intently at. "Oh, Mary, I thought it was light out. I'm sorry," Mrs. H stated, and then finally looked at me. "Char, would you be a dear and help me get back to my room? It seems I've gotten the time mixed up again." I sighed and began walking to the other side of the nurse's station. I gently placed my hand on Miss H's arm and began to guide her. "Miss H, who's Mary?" I asked. I know that we aren't supposed to feed into any type of delusions or hallucinations that a patient has, but the way Miss Patient had been looking at the one spot next to me, it irked me. "Oh, Mary, the charge nurse. She comes here only at night. She used to come all the time, but now she can only be here on certain nights. That's what she told me the other day." I tucked Miss H into her bed and put on her little alarm that would trigger if she tried to leave her bed unattended. Shaking my head, I saw one of my CNAs doing her rounds in Unit B. You see, there are 2 units, Unit A and Unit B. Usually we had 1 nurse to each unit and 2 CNAs for each unit as well. But we were a bit fucked that night due to the incident of the night before, leaving only myself and 2 other CNAs on shift, making it difficult for us to get to all of our work duties and do rounds at the same time. I turned on my walkie-talkie. "Sheila, I'm going to still be at Unit A if you guys need me. Just walkie me, please." Sheila nodded to me and continued her rounds as I walked like a zombie back to my chair, then noticed my files had been moved around on my desk. I shook my head. I must have toppled the files over when I got up. I think. Scooting the chair up to the desk, I began to work again, concentrating on inputting the data and writing notes for the patients I'd given midnight medications to, beginning to feel my eyes droop a little as I rubbed them. So I had assumed it was either Sheila or Janice because both CNAs had worn white scrubs today. Where is the linens closet? The voice was very soft, a faint whisper. Down the hall towards the entrance to the ER section. It should be the closet with the sliding door. Are you becoming forgetful tonight? I joked without looking up. The figure stood there for a moment before almost gliding out of my vision. Closing my eyes again and shaking my head, I brushed it off and continued to work when Janice came up to me. Her face was pale. What's wrong, Jan? I was pretty sure my eyes were bloodshot and dry, but the way Janice looked at me in unease set off alarm bells inside me. I stood up slowly. What's wrong? I asked. Shar? Who were you talking to a few minutes ago? One of you guys. Didn't you ask me about the linen closet? I frowned as she shook her head no. I've been in the kitchen stocking for tomorrow morning's breakfast service. I just came out and noticed you were talking to someone. But she stopped. She seemed afraid now. But what, Janice? A troubled expression was forming on her pretty face. It looked like she didn't know what to say. Janice, what is it? Was it the lady in white? She finally managed to say. Did you talk to her? I sat back down. If this was about some crazy ghost bullshit again and some dark ghost, I didn't want to hear it. Janice, I don't want to hear about full moon nonsense and ghosts right now. I have a shit ton of work to do and I don't have time to talk about ghost stories tonight. I'm not trying to be a bitch here, but Janice held up her hands, fear still etched across her heart-shaped face. Shar, please be careful of who you speak to. The dead welcome any conversation as an invitation to haunt you, especially here. I gave her a look and breathed a heavy sigh. Jan, thanks for your concern, but I think I probably was hallucinating or seeing things from lack of sleep. Don't worry. I went back to my work as Janice began to wring the hem of her white scrub top. Please, just be careful and don't answer to any knocks. Janice stated she looked around one more time and left to go back into the kitchen. What the hell? Don't answer to knocking. I again shook my head. We could practically make this into a drinking game for how many times I shook my head. Someone should down 2 shots of their favorite hard liquor. Lightning danced outside as the hours crept by slowly. The storm outside went into full gear as hail began to pummel the rock at 5 a.m. as I made my blood draw rounds. After drawing my last tube, I went off the floor of Unit B and headed to the main part of the hospital to draw off the specimens. My footsteps echoed in the nearly empty hospital, as most of the ER nurses and doctors were probably doing shift change. I didn't see anyone except for the janitor as I went to the lab. I entered the lab and filed the vials into the appropriate areas for the phlebotomist's eyes to find when they arrive on shift. At that moment, I hadn't given it much thought as I approached the door and swung it open. I frowned as I realized no one was there. Peering out into the corridor, I didn't even see the janitor. I looked around one more time before actually stepping out into the hallway and shutting the door. As the door closed behind me, I suddenly felt a sense of unease hit the bottom of my stomach as I made my way back to the unit. Again, I reasoned it had to do with the lack of sleep I had gotten and the fact that I hadn't stomached decent food in the last 48 hours, because coffee wasn't considered a food of sustenance yet. As I pulled my key card out to open the door for Unit A, I heard knocking, but the knock was more like as if someone was drunk and could only raise their hand to knock every 5 to 10 seconds. It was a strange, dull knock that echoed all the way down the hall to me. The knocks continued, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise as the knock started to speed up, my hand immediately pressing the keycard against the sensor as it rejected my card. Then the knocks began to start echoing closer, as if they were footsteps walking towards me. The knocking got louder and louder as I tried again with my card, and it finally allowed me to enter, swinging the door open and slamming it behind me. I heard the knocking as it suddenly began barreling down on the door behind me, faced the door and began to walk backwards as it kept going until it was more of a high-pitched whirring noise, and then it stopped. My heart was racing, sweat beating down my forehead. This had to be the results of working too much OT and very little sleep, with caffeine being my only lifeline of energy. I rubbed my temples as I forced myself to breathe and calm down. It was all in my mind, and that's all it was. I said it out loud. It's all in my mind. Before I could turn back around, I felt the hairs rise at the back of my neck. Where is the linen closet? I screamed bloody murder at this instant and whirled to find Miss H holding her hand to her chest, staring at me. I gasped. I'm so sorry, Miss H. You scared the panties off me. Mrs. H seemed amused and again asked me where the linen closet was, to which I helped her get a couple of new blankets and pillowcases. The rest of the shift went smoothly. My shift ended at 8:30 a.m. 2 hours of OT clocked in for that day. I grabbed my things to get the hell out of Dodge, but was stopped by Janice, who had also stayed behind to help finish a few things. I almost let out a groan of agony when she stopped me. I was tired. I really wanted to go home and just sleep. It was my day off for the next 3 days. Shar, you heard the knocking, didn't you? Her hand was gripping my wrist in a vice-like hold that sent signals of pain to my groggy head. Anne, not now, please. I pulled my arm away from her, practically having to rip it out of her grasp as I saw a look of terror in her eyes. Please take this. She pushed a stone and a bundle of sage into my hand. As much as I tried to push it back into her hands, Janice firmly gripped my wrist and covered her hand over my own and looked at me with a dead, serious eye. Keep this on you at all times, and by the foot of the shower when you bathe. Please do this, Shar. For me. The fear in her voice rattled me a bit at that moment, but just for that moment. Hey, Jan. I pocketed the items into my scrub pants pocket, leaving the facility with thoughts of just falling into bed. I had made it home without any issues and scurried up the stairs to my upstairs apartment. The morning was quiet, with only the occasional whoosh sound coming from cars passing by from the highway. Peeling off my scrubs and forgetting the items that Janice had given me, I fell onto the couch and was close to knocking out until I heard a dull knock come from the closed bedroom door in front of me.